everyone, my name is Sana and today I'm going to be sharing my very first video in my channel. My channel is going to cover all crime related stories, weird stories that are happening all over the world. So if you like the content of my channel and if you enjoyed today's video, please hit the button subscribe. To begin, I just want to put some context on where the idea came from to start my channel. So when I used to be a kid, I was around 11 years old, I started to enjoy storytelling. So whenever we went to my grandparents' house, I used to gather with all my cousins and I used to share with them some stories. So they enjoyed really those moments. And since then, I've always been passionate about telling stories. So I thought, why not starting a channel and start to share with the public these stories if they also enjoy them. Today's story is going to be a special one, a very weird one. Personally, when I read it, I was really lost in thoughts after I finished reading the story. I was just wondering, how could people be so cruel? Things didn't even make sense when I was going through the details of the story and how people would even think in that extent. So by the end of this video, please let me know, what did you think of the story? How were you feeling after you heard the story? I'll be very interested to hear from you guys what you thought about this story. So the title of today's story is going to be The Precious Gold. You might wonder, what does that even mean? So by the end of this video, I promise you guys that I'll be able to understand what that means. On the 20th April 1990, a guy was walking by the street, and as he passes by the trash bin, he sees a huge black plastic bag. That plastic bag didn't look like trash bag, so he was curious to know what's in the bag. He went, and as he opened the bag, he could see a body of a girl who is chopped into pieces. But the entire body does not have even a drop of blood. He was in a shock and he reported that to the police. As the police came to investigate what's happening, they took the body to the autopsy to understand who the person is. Unfortunately, they couldn't find the hands. So the person who has disposed the body purposely has removed the hands, because if they found the hands, they'll be able to identify the person from the fingerprints. Now, the body that has been found chopped was still fresh. So they knew that the crime is still new and the plastic bags have just been disposed less than 3 to 4 hours as per the autopsy. So they sent the entire crew to look for the hands in the entire neighborhood and even in the close by neighborhoods. They could not find anything after 24 hours of research. So it was very difficult to start this investigation since they had no hints. So to begin the investigation, the police has decided to interrogate every person who has a criminal record who lived in that neighborhood. They have started the investigation process, and after a few days, they couldn't figure it out. Nothing was found around that particular crime. So they continued doing the same investigation, and 2 weeks later, still no news around the crime. So they just thought, let's just leave this case aside and see if maybe the person will come and just confess to the crime they had committed, or someone will come and share some news around this crime. So after 2 weeks, in a small village that's next to this main city where the crime had happened, they found a 10-year-old girl who was being slaughtered with a knife that was not very sharp. Luckily, the girl did not die. They took her to the hospital. They couldn't identify her family because, of course, she couldn't talk. And not only that, that was not the only reason why the girl couldn't talk. They also found out that someone has cut her tongue and stitched the remaining of the tongue, and it seems like the cut is not old because the blood is still very fresh. So the gendarmerie surgeon who was looking after this crime felt really bad about the girl's situation and was going to see her every single day, waiting for the moment she will wake up. She was at the ICU at that point, and all he was hoping for is that she wakes up so that he's able to connect with her somehow to understand who did this to her. Now, the pressure has started to raise, and the gendarmerie centers have connected with each other and informed each center about this 10 years old kid who is at the hospital. Now let's go back to the initial story. The girl was being found in plastic bags near the big trash bin. The sergeant who was looking after this crime had a very difficult commandant. So one day, the commandant asks the sergeant to come to his office, and he asks him, "Where are you guys with this crime?" And the sergeant says, "We still haven't found anything new." The commandant got angry, and he told him this crime has to be solved as soon as possible, because if the media finds out about this crime, it's going to become a public opinion case, and we do not want to be there. So through the autopsy that has been done, they found out that the girl was hit with a heavy stone in the head, and that's how she died. Then they cut the body into pieces, squeezed the entire blood out of it, and they washed even those pieces to make sure there is no remainings of blood. Weird. You might wonder why. Now, I'll explain why. So far, no news around the story. The commander has started to become more stressed as time is ticking. So the sergeant has gone to the office of the commander to have a conversation about this crime. And as they were talking, the commander says to the sergeant, "I think that this crime is somehow related to some black magic practices." Now, the sergeant didn't really understand what that means and started to question what the commander is saying. And he just had to agree with him and go with his flow and say, yeah, that might be real. Now, the commander starts to tell him, "How can we confirm that?" And then the sergeant really didn't have any answer because they still can't find anything around this crime. Now let's go back to the initial crime about the 10 years old girl that has been found. So the girl has woken up, and that was a great news. As soon as the sergeant heard that, he ran to meet the girl and start the interrogation. There was a nurse who was able to communicate with this girl, so they had to involve her in the interrogation because the girl couldn't speak or talk. The nurse then tells them that through her communication with the girl, she understood that she comes from a small village, specifically next to the woods and a jail. Of course, the police officers knew that in that entire city, there's only one village that's nearby a very old jail. So it was not difficult for them to go and find out the village that the girl comes from. They were able to identify her dad, and they spoke to him. They informed him that they found his daughter and that she is at the hospital at the moment. So they asked him when was the last time he's seen his daughter. He then said that his daughter has left the family a year ago. There was a guy who was offering job positions for small girls to go work for families as maids, and in exchange they'll get a salary of $30. So the father only knew that his daughter works for a very wealthy family in the main city. Now the investigation had started around this guy to identify him. They asked all the families within the village, and no one knew anything about him. They only knew his name. Now let's go back to the other story about the girl who's been found next to this big trash bin, cut into pieces with no blood drops. You remember, guys? Yeah. So the commander who's looking after that case received a telegraph, and basically the telegraph communicated about this 10 years old daughter that was found. So the police officers believe that these two cases are somehow related because they believe that the tongue of the girl has been cut so that she does not disclose something she had seen, or a crime, something that should not be communicated. The commander then replies to the telegraph with all the details that he has found about this girl who has been dumped next to the big trash bin. So when the team looking after the 10 years old's case received the telegraph, they started also to have some doubts whether these two cases are somehow related. So now the investigation has been expanded to a bigger and wider team. They started to look for this guy who is basically collecting small girls, taking them to work for rich families. The sergeant goes to visit the girl, and they sat with her for 4 continuous hours with the help of the nurse to find out some more information from her. And after the 4 hours of investigation, they understood that the girl worked for a family that was living in front of the main port in that city. So they went to the location, printed pictures of this girl, and started to ask people around whether they could recognize her. They kept asking around until they found out from a shopkeeper that this girl works for this woman called Fatima. So they went, knocked to the door, and Fatima opens the door. They ask her about the girl, and she says that it's been a month, she hasn't seen this girl. Then they asked her how she got this girl to work for her. She said that it's through a guy. They asked her for the address of the guy, and she was able to share that with them. They went, knocked at the door of this guy. When he opened the door, they asked him, "Is he Ali?" And he said, "Yes, it's me." So then they took him for investigation. So then they asked him about the 10 years old girl, and he started to get very nervous. He seemed not really collected, he just couldn't speak properly, and that's when the sergeant started to have doubts. All the guy was saying is that he hasn't seen this girl for a month now. So then the guy says that this 10 years old girl has a very smart mind. Many times she ran away from Fatima's house to the port, and she hid in containers hoping that she will escape somewhere. So one day, a fisherman was leaving the port, and he saw the little girl hiding between containers. He went and spoke to her, and she seemed really scared. He asked her, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "I'm just hiding here. I cannot go back to where I'm working." He asked her, "Where are you working?" And she told him that she works for this woman called Fatima, and that she beats her. She only made excuses, so he doesn't take her back to Fatima. Then he tells her, "Would you like to come with me? I'll take you to a very nice family in the same city so that you can work for them, and they're going to treat you very nicely." The girl accepted, and she went in the car with the guy. As they were leaving the port, there was a gendarmerie officer at the gate. He stopped him and asked him about the girl. "Who is she, and where do you know her from?" Then the guy says that he found her between containers, and he's just going to take her to another family who's going to take care of her. Now, the officer takes the plate number of the car, the name and the ID of the guy, and he let them go. So back to the guy who's in their interrogation process. He said that as he was looking around for this girl, he went to check at the port to see maybe someone has seen her. So he was basically asking around, and as he enters the port to ask people there, he meets the officer. That's when the officer tells him the news about this little girl. The next step was to find the fisherman. Of course, it wasn't very difficult to find him since all his details are with the officer that was at the gate. So they went directly to the house of this guy, and they asked him, "Where has he taken this girl?" He said, "I have not had any contact with the girl for the past entire month. The last time I've seen her is when I dropped her to my brother and his wife's house so that she could live with them and work for them." The police officers then headed to his brother's house. They knocked the door of his brother at 1:30 a.m. and they asked him, "Where is your wife?" While the guy is talking to them, they hear a gunshot. They went running upstairs, and they found that the wife has shot herself in the head. Also, they found a new maid who is witnessing the entire crime happening in front of her eyes. They then moved the wife's body to the autopsy, and they arrested her husband and the maid for further investigation. So they took him to the police station, and that's when the interrogation process started. They showed him the picture of the 10-year-old girl and the other girl's body that was dumped next to the big trash bin, and of course he was able to identify both of them. And that's when he confesses about the crimes he had committed with the help of his wife. Then he tells them the entire story from A to Z. He says that he used to be an entrepreneur, he had a lot of money. All of a sudden, he lost every single penny. So the situation has become really terrible for this man and his wife. And the wife, while she sees that her husband couldn't find a job and they're going into a very difficult situation, she proposes a solution to her husband. She says to him, I have a plan for you that's going to make us very fortunate. The man, of course, was very curious to understand, and he asked her, what is this plan? She told her husband that she knows a swindler or a magician who performs black magic with which they could work and they could make good money. Of course, the husband disagreed to what his wife is saying. How could I move from an entrepreneur to someone who works for a swindler? And then the wife tells him, just listen to me carefully and try to understand what I'm saying. All we need to do is to go find the precious gold. Now, the husband doesn't understand what his wife means by precious gold. And she explains that the blood of someone who's been killed or who has died in an accident is considered a very expensive blood. Yes, guys, that's the precious gold. And basically, they use it in some black magic rituals, and it's so expensive to buy. Now, the husband started to think, I don't really have any solution in hand, so I must just follow what my wife is saying. So they started driving around looking for accidents. They go to the location and they just take some of the blood using like a piece of cloth or like a piece of paper. As they kept doing this for a while, they started to feel that yes, they're generating good money, but they started to feel like they can make more money if they had more blood. So their new business expands, and then they start looking for ways of how to find more blood, and that's how they started working for 3 magicians or swindlers. Yes, guys, they expanded their business. Then they got this new maid, and that was their first victim. It was the girl that was dumped next to the big trash bin. So apparently, when the man left to meet his friends, the wife decided to kill the girl, even without waiting for her husband to be involved in the whole thing. She took a very big piece of wood and she hit the girl at the back of her head multiple times until she died. When the husband came back after he went out to see some friends, he found the girl dead on the floor. They then decided to get rid of the body after they have taken out all the blood. Now, they also had the 10 years old maid with them, and she had seen the entire thing. The wife started to worry as the girl now knows everything about this crime they had committed. So as the guy finished cutting the body into pieces, he went to dump it next to the bin. He came back. The wife told him, we need to find a solution to get rid of this girl. Of course, you might wonder why they didn't use her blood. Because there is a condition for this blood. It has to be of someone who's above 20 years old, someone who's mature, or at least a teenager. So then they asked him about the hands that they couldn't find of this girl that has been chopped into pieces. And he said that he dumped them in the woods. Now, what they did to the little girl is they decided to cut her tongue and stitch it at home by themselves. The girl started to behave badly with them. She started to become more angry, irritated. So now they started to panic even more. So they just decided to kill her and get rid of her. Early morning next day, as they were driving their car, the guy decides to stop on the side of the road and just kill the girl. He took a knife that was not really sharp and he decided to slaughter her. He was really panicking that someone might see him. So the guy says that as he was slaughtering the girl, she started to cry, and that really made him feel so bad. He decided not to just push the knife down her throat, just to dump her there. The court has then announced the verdict. The guy has been condemned to death. The chopped body of the girl has been returned to her family, and the 10 years old little girl has been returned to her family. The fisherman and the maid have been released since they had nothing to do with this crime. The 3 swindlers with whom the couple used to work have been arrested for 25 years. And guys, this is the end of our story. I hope that you enjoyed hanging out with me today, and please leave your comments and tell me what did you think of this cruel story. Also, it would be nice to know from you what kind of stories you would like to hear from me. thank you guys for watching me today, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.